Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm back and I've got a little bit of an update for you guys. I graduated high school. I'm a college student now, and as a result, instead of shooting my reviews in a kind of nice studio-looking-ish area, I'm shooting in what's essentially a glorified version of like my mom's backyard shed. So that's going to take some getting used to, but I promise I'm going to make up for the fact that I haven't done a video like this in a long time. By starting now, more reviews are going to be coming soon, in addition to the cinematography videos. And I've even got another big damn video analysis in store that's along the same lines as my American Hustle video. If you don't know what I'm talking about, chances are you're Canadian or Italian, and Sony hates you. Nevertheless, here is a sneak peek for the next subject of my big video. I don't have everything written yet, but I promise it's going to be coming soon. Here's the sneak preview. Fuck! So that's what's going on right now, and another quick update, I've got a Patreon now. I want to make it really brief in this video so that way I won't make another video on top of it. Basically, if you follow the link in the description, it'll take you to my Patreon page. If you donate $2, you'll have a credit at the end of all my videos, and if you donate $3, I'll even accept a request for you for either a review for Josh's Film Corner or Overlooked. Yes, I'm actually going to start that up really soon. And that even includes the cinematography videos. If you have a film that you think has stunning cinematography, let me know. I will find it and I will make a cinematography tribute to it. So please donate if you can. It'll really help a lot in the long run. Now, with everything said and done, let's go ahead, let's sit down, and let's talk about what's probably the most hyped film of the year that doesn't include Justice League, Star Wars, or even The Disaster Artist. What is it? A Thor movie. In particular, the third installment in the worst film of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Thor Ragnarok is directed by New Zealand director Taika Waititi, also known as this guy, and stars Chris Hemsworth, of course, Tom Hiddleston, because he's pretty much the reason the internet likes the Thor movies to begin with, Academy Award winner Cate Blanchett, Mark I'll Never Have My Own Solo Marvel Film Ruffalo, and Tessa Thompson. The film follows Thor after his search for the Infinity Stones turns fruitless as he decides to turn his attention towards running Asgard and preventing Ragnarok, the end of days. Meanwhile, the goddess of death Hela is on the warpath to take over Asgard and to go to war with all the 9 realms. Thor tries to fight her, but fails, gets his hammer destroyed, and gets thrown into big trouble in Little Flash Guardians of the Galaxy, and
shapes and colors the likes of which I've never seen.
Before I go into detail about this film in particular, I feel it's best to give my quick thoughts on the other 2 Thor movies, as well as the few Taika Waititi films that I have seen. Trust me, for the latter, I'm going to explain why I'm doing that. Now, the first Thor honestly isn't that bad, but it's not entirely memorable. Kenneth Branagh tries to play the story straight like a Shakespearean tragedy with Loki's backstory and all the scenes on Asgard, which are really well done and even have some great cinematography going for them. But when it goes to Earth, it's a very mixed bag. And then the Dutch angles, oh my god, the Dutch angles. I'm not joking when I say it gives Battlefield Earth a run for its money. But overall, it's the best that we could have hoped for at the time, and it was really the best way to bring Thor to the big screen. I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10, but it's still a good movie in its own right. Thor the Dark World just sucks, though. It just sucks. Alan Taylor may have felt like the best bet due to the fact that he directed some Game of Thrones episodes, but as a result, the movie doesn't excel above the other Marvel films. It's shot very blandly, the Earth scenes are even worse. I mean, the acting is just atrocious at times. Come on, Stellan Skarsgård, you're better than this! And if it wasn't for the fact that Tom Hiddleston saves this movie and that Ant-Man exists, this would have easily been the worst MCU film by far. Seriously, Tom Hiddleston is so good as Loki, it's almost annoying at this point. It's a 5 out of 10. It's the ultimate definition of mediocre. Now we get to Thor Ragnarok's director, Taika Waititi. And I've only seen about 4-ish of his movies. I count one of them as half and half because it's a short film. I saw Thor Ragnarok, What We Do in the Shadows, Boy, and 2 Cars One Night. And what do I think about him and his films in particular? Well, with him, I think he's very funny and talented. He's kind of like what would happen if Michel Gondry and Wes Anderson had a baby in New Zealand. He's got an amazing personality, isn't pretentious, and is pretty funny to boot.
My dad said this.
Did your dad really say that?
But my mom said this.
His first film, Two Cars, One Night, was actually nominated for an Academy Award. It's the first indicator of his quirky style, and it's a nice little taste of what's to come. The delivery between the three kids is stilted at times, but it's got this infectious charm that just shines throughout the whole short. It really does capture this feeling of being a child, even in the backdrop of late-night New Zealand. If I were to rate this film, and I have to, I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. Now, the same thing I said here can be said for Boy in 2010, which is honestly so good. I think it might be one of my favorite films of all time. The movie is just sublime. Even when you feel like you can't relate, it does a great job of making you feel like you're with these kids 100%. There's a really good style in this movie, reinforcing the Wes Anderson, Michel Gondry vibe with Rocky's powers, and it has one of the best opening scenes I've seen in a film, where Boy describes who his dad is.
My dad's not here right now. He's a busy man. He's a master carver, deep-sea treasure diver, the captain of the rugby team, and he holds the record for punching out the most people with one hand.
Their performances are all around great. The child actors are honestly some of the best I've seen in a movie of this nature, and Taika Waititi, who plays Boy's dad, Alamein, delivers probably one of the best performances in the film and his career in general. He balances that dangerous tightrope of pulling off charming, likable, and dangerous at the same time. And also he can dance like Michael Jackson. If there's one thing kind of dragging the movie down, it's the fact that you can see how cheap the movie is. But even then, the cheapness almost adds to the film's charm and really makes the whole film feel like a beautiful love letter to cinema from New Zealand. And it's so fun to watch. I had a smile on my face as I was watching the whole film. With a beautiful story, delightful characters, and a dance sequence at the end that would make Michael Jackson proud, Boy is one of the best, most heartwarming coming-of-age stories I've ever seen in my life. I'm even contemplating doing an overlooked video on it, because it more than earns a 10 out of 10 from me. What We Do in the Shadows is co-directed by Waititi and Jermaine Clement of Flight of the Conchords fame. It's a mockumentary about 4 different generations of vampires living in the same flat as they accidentally turn a young man into a vampire and have to deal with the consequences of it. For being such a low-budget film, this movie pulls off so many high-concept situations. The special effects in this movie are unbelievable. On top of that, it's funny as hell. This is probably one of Waititi's funniest films he's ever done, and the chemistry between everybody is so fun to watch. The standout performers in this movie being Waititi as Viago,
Well, that didn't go so great.
Jermaine Clement as Vladislav,
Just leave me to do my dark bidding on the internet.
You're bidding on.
I'm bidding on the table.
and Stu Rutherford as Stu. It's not without its flaws. For one thing, I think it drags when the main plot takes over, and Jackie was kind of a wasted character when they never really followed up on her. But it's still a great film, and honestly one of the best comedies this decade. It's a 9 out of 10, I highly recommend this. Now you might be wondering why I chose to cover Waititi's other films in particular before I covered Thor Ragnarok. Well, the reason for that is because when I've seen reviewers talking about Thor Ragnarok in particular, they're talking about how it's such a different style, and it's got such a different feel compared to the other Marvel movies that came before it. They said that it really feels like Waititi's touch is all over the place in every single frame. It's one of the main things everybody is praising this movie for. And if I'm being honest, I've seen the film, and it's a Marvel movie. So at this point, you're either on board or you're not. Me personally, I really loved this movie, but I will admit there are a few flaws. But there is a voice here. Although it's still kind of muted when it comes down to it. Let's talk about the good in this movie. It's still a great movie, don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to say it's perfect by any means. For one thing, it definitely feels the most fun of the Thor films. They finally decided not to waste any time with any of the Earth stuff. Literally only 3 scenes take place on Earth at all. They decided to focus the main plot details on Asgard and Sakaar, and the movie is all the better for it. On top of that, this is easily the best performance from Chris Hemsworth as Thor, who really feels like he's come into his own as the character. On top of that, this is even a good performance from Mark Ruffalo, who I didn't realize I had missed as Bruce Banner and the Hulk after Age of Ultron. And then of course there's all the newcomers to the franchise. Cate Blanchett is deliciously hamming it up as Hela, the goddess of death. And she plays her role as basically if Maleficent was like Hitler. Jeff Goldblum is great as the Grandmaster, just chewing the scenery wherever he goes. And Taika Waititi as Korg is so lovable and adorable, you almost wish he was a bigger character than he already is and had more to do with the rest of the movie. On top of that, some of the most eye-popping visuals in the entire MCU are on full display in this film, giving Doctor Strange a run for its money. And everything that I said about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 can be applied tenfold here. The cinematography is beautiful. It really feels like you're watching a modern-day Big Trouble in Little China Flash Gordon type film on the big screen. And Waititi does bring his trademark brand of humor on display here, in particular when the scenes take place on Sakaar. But there's 3 things in this movie that are keeping me from declaring it the best MCU film ever made. For one thing, the buildup of Hela could have been something really powerful. If there was a scene that shows Hela before she gets imprisoned, or some kind of buildup before she shows up, that would have given us more time to get to know how big of a threat she is and how she works as a villain. Instead, in the film, she comes in at about the 15 to 20 minute mark, introduced in an exposition dump by an Anthony Hopkins that is clearly phoning it in. It almost feels weird when Hela shows up, almost as if it's an afterthought and inconsequential until she destroys Thor's hammer to compensate for the fact that we don't know anything about her. But it doesn't hold a candle to one of the bigger issues with Thor Ragnarok. It's humor. There's so many laughs a minute that we need to offset it with a serious moment so that way we won't stay breathless, or we can actually take the situation and the stakes seriously. Waititi does this expertly with Boy and What We Do in the Shadows, with Boy's fantasy world being harshly cut off by Alamane's grim reality of being a loser dad, or the mornings of Stu and Peter.
But this is what happens when you're a vampire. You have to watch everyone die. Your mother and father, all your friends, sometimes brutal, like slipping and falling onto a giant spike, or falling asleep in an autumn pile of leaves.
Here, good God, I can barely count the moments when we're allowed to sit back and take in the characters, or just take in a situation. One of the worst parts is a scene where, no spoilers, Bruce Banner jumps down to turn into the Hulk. In a scene that should feel epic, when the stakes are so high for all of the Asgardians in the scene, a gag is made where Bruce hits the ground and splats like a cartoon character. Like, guys, this is the Incredible Hulk! Show some respect! Even worse, they already did this gag back in the Incredible Hulk movie with Edward Norton. Are we supposed to just ignore that movie now? What would have worked is if we saw him just kind of stagger after falling and barely hanging on to life, if they really wanted to do that, and show that he's barely holding on to what little he has left of Bruce as he's slowly turning into a monster. That way, we get the initial laugh at the splat, but we also take in a bit of dramatic tension seeing him transform into the Hulk again. But even then, the movie is stuck with so much humor that, in all honesty, it feels inconsequential. The worst example being Karl Urban's character Scourge, who's basically what would happen if Dante from Clerks was in Asgard. But even then, it's easily one of the more fun Marvel movies, and really does feel like the best film in the Thor series. I like what it does with Thor as a character, and the ending does have me excited for where this particular series is going to go in the future. I just hope that later on down the road, if they keep Waititi in the MCU for more Thor sequels, he goes more out there and tries to improve on his work here. It's not a bad transition from indie film to action blockbuster, and he really can shoot action sequences well. The Hulk Thor fight and both instances of the Immigrant Song being used are terrific examples of this. But as a first stab, it's a good start for what's to come if Waititi does decide to keep doing the genre. And it's a nice step in the right direction for Marvel films. I give it an 8 out of 10. It's well worth the price of admission. And don't forget to stay for the end credits. I mean, seriously, why do people still walk out in the middle of the end credits? Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, and if you want to talk to me about Thor Ragnarok, please do so in the comments. I always respond to the comments because I'm a smaller YouTuber and I don't have the ego to think I'm better than everybody else. That was my Thor Ragnarok review. I'm Joshua Lozano. Please donate to the Patreon if you can, and I will see you guys next time.